Hi everybody, today I'm going to be doing a review of the SOG Sync 2 Traveller. The SOG Sync is available in two different sizes and two different models if you like. So this is the Traveller, which is a bladeless version. The Travellers are also black coated, and the Traveller is available in the SOG Sync 1, the smaller model, and this, which is the SOG Sync 2, the larger model. The standard model, which has a blade and is uncoated, is not legal in the UK unfortunately, despite having an under 3-inch non-locking blade. The government have decided it is a disguised knife because it's a knife that's disguised as a belt buckle. That's certainly not something I agree with, but that is unfortunately the way it is. Now, as you can probably see, there is quite a lot of wear on this, on the belt buckle and on the tool itself. I've had it and worn it for quite a while, over a year now I think, so it's certainly due for a review. We'll start off as usual with the size. Now the size of this tool is quite hard to compare to. Here is a Gerber dime. I'll shuffle that down, there we go. And a Gerber Center Drive Plus. Put a Leatherman signal in there as well. If I flip these over, you can see it's a very thin tool. It's actually thinner than a Gerber dime, far thinner than a Leatherman signal. In its open configuration, it reaches not far off the same grip length as a Leatherman signal. In fact, more or less exactly the same grip length as a Leatherman signal, and about the same grip area as Gerber Center Drive Plus as well. Where they do differ is in the length of the jaws. As you can see, the jaws are far bigger on something like Center Drive than they are on this SOG Sync. If we throw them up against the Gerber dime though, the jaws are actually exactly the same length and open to almost exactly the same size. It is very much worth noting, however, that the jaws on the SOG Sync 2 are somewhat imprecise. They're actually slightly thicker at the head than the jaws on Gerber Center Drive, and considerably thicker than the jaws on something like a Gerber dime. Before we move on from the size comparisons, I'm going to throw in a whole bunch of other stuff because I didn't really know what to compare this to size-wise. Here is an XM18 3.5 inch, quite a popular size for a knife. Spyderco UKPK, very popular UK legal carry. I have an Ontario Rat Model 1, another very common knife. And a couple lights, just as another form of size comparison. Here is a Olight S1R Baton 2 and an Olight Warrior Mini. So there you go. That's the size comparisons for this review. Gonna head straight into the tools. So, SOG say this model of the Sync has 11 tools, and for once that's a relatively fair claim. They're not doing the old Gerber trick of, oh, a lanyard holds a tool now. They're not doing any of that. So, yeah, there's more or less 11 tools. There's one that I'll pick holes in a little bit later on. So, first tool on the SOG Sync is the pliers. The plier tips are rather thick. As I said, they're definitely not needle nose pliers. I've already size compared that, so I won't go on about it too much longer, but you do need to be aware that these are not going to be particularly precise pliers if that's what you're after. They're also not the most ergonomic pliers in the world. Now, I'm sure I don't really need to say that either. The handles are very blocky. They're relatively sharp. Sharp's a bit of a strong word. They are just angular corners. They're not rounded or chamfered. So if you're gripping hard, you can certainly feel them dig in. That is going to be the case for every tool within this SOG Sync. So I'm not going to mention that again. All of the tools have a slight ergonomic issue, but in reality, almost all multi-tools do. So I'm not going to harp on about that too much. Next tool is the wire crimpers, which are back here. I have not needed to use them for wire crimping, so I can't claim to know how well they work. So, the ruler here is really pretty good, kind of surprisingly good for a tool like this. So you can see that when you straighten out a tool like this, the plier head must be closed. You have a 7-inch ruler. Now that is a far better measuring tool than something like the ruler on the Gerber Center Drive, which is down each of these sides, which you can't really get to where you need it to measure things with. So the SOG Sync's ruler is really pretty good, and for a tool that collapses down to the size it does, it's a surprisingly good ruler. I would have quite liked to have seen centimetre markings on this side, but I get that they wanted it to be completely plain when it was on your belt so that it didn't stand out so much. So yeah, I kind of understand that, but there we go. A bit to get it clipped on there. But yes, I kind of understand why they wanted to leave it completely sterile on this side, but broadly speaking, the ruler is very good. Now, bottle opener is the next tool, and sadly this is another one. There we go, there's the bottle opener. I'm sure it works fine. I haven't really used that either, I'm afraid, but there is a bottle opener. Flathead screwdrivers. Now there are 3 different sizes of flathead screwdriver in this tool. Although I'm not sure they advertised this one as a flathead driver. If they want it to be used as a driver, they could really do with thinning down the tip a bit. It's quite square at the tip, not particularly brilliant. The other 2 drivers have thinner tips and therefore tend to fit better. A lot of the time, if I'm working with a really small screw and I'd rather use a driver this size, I've got to go up and use this one because the tip's just slightly thinner and I would struggle to get in with this smaller size of screw. Now, there is a 3-sided file here, if you believe what SOG are telling you. So they claim that this side here is a file, that this edge here, which has essentially just lines marked down it, which you probably can't even really see, and this side is also a file. This side is very, very smooth, pretty poor, doesn't really work as a file at all. The edge here, I think that's just not a file whatsoever. The third side though, the cross-cut side, actually does work. It's certainly not perfect, but it is vastly superior to the other 2 sides. So that's something. There is a file that is usable here. I wouldn't call it a great file, but there is a usable file. Scissors. Now the scissors here are quite nice. Unlike a lot of tools this size, they are actually sprung, which is good. However, they only really cut within the first sort of 50%. So you see, if I go completely onto this, they're cutting this, but they're struggling a bit there. If I use the first half, they cut very easily, very cleanly. It's the back half where they start to kind of crease up things instead of actually cutting them. See that there? If I use the front half, cuts nicely. Now that may well be wear from having this for a while and using it for a while, but that's certainly how mine is at the moment. The Phillips driver. The Phillips driver is really not the best. It is pretty two-dimensional. It's certainly far thinner than something like the hex bit on a Gerber center drive. Now, I understand why you have to make a Phillips thin to get it to fit in a tool, but a lot of other thin Phillips have worked better for me than this one. This has just never felt like it gripped properly into any of the screws that I've done with it, which is unfortunate, but I have still always managed to get done what I've needed to get done. The wire cutters in this tool. So the wire cutters work quite well. There is a small amount of play in the joint of the tool, which means there's a potential to trap small wires, but I have cut a fair amount of wire with this tool and I haven't seen that happen at all. So I think the wire cutters are better than I expected. That's what I'll say about this tool. Now every tool locks open except from the Phillips driver and the largest flathead driver. These 2 tools act as the lock release for the respective side. So if I open, say, this tool here, I can't close it. Close that to make this a bit simpler. I can't close this tool. However, if I lift the large flathead up halfway, I can now close that tool. That does, however, mean that if the large flathead is open, there is no lock for the large flathead, and the same goes for the Phillips. Now, in my opinion, these are the wrong tools to be non-locking. The 2 largest drivers in this tool are most likely going to be the 2 tools that you use with the most force. So I think they should have been the top priority for locks. Using the Phillips driver, I have occasionally had it collapse, and given my forces going straight down, once the tool collapses, the other joint in the tool here will also tend to collapse, and that just leads to the tool shutting on your fingers, which is somewhat unpleasant. I think that is by far and away the biggest design flaw with this tool. This should have been a top priority for a lock, and so should the large flathead. Not having them lock is, in my opinion, not a brilliant piece of design. There is also, unfortunately, quite a lot of play in every tool when it's open, and I do mean a lot of play. So, I don't know if you can see that too clearly. That yeah, you can see that on the camera. If I open out all three tools, you'll see even more clearly if I wiggle just the middle one. Yeah, that's a lot of horizontal play in a tool. The tools are all pretty thin, but even if I grip all three of them together, there's substantial movement in there, which is really not good. And in my opinion, that is by far and away the biggest build quality flaw with this tool. There is also a little bit of movement in the scales. That's going to be kind of hard to see. You can hear it though. There's a little bit of movement in the scales on each side, which is also not brilliant, but it's not as big an issue for me as the massive amount of play in the tools themselves. That's the biggest build quality issue with this tool. So let's talk about the attachment. So the SOG sink comes with this pocket clip, which can be screwed on to the base plate of this tool. You can remove and you can replace the belt buckle with this piece here. You remove the bar that the belt loop goes through and screw this on. The screws are still hooked in there. I don't know if you'll be able to see them, but yes, they are. Now it's great that they give you another option to carry the tool a different way. However, there's a lot of tools out there that clip to what you want to carry them on. Like this Leatherman Signal, for example, has a pocket clip on it. I think if you want to carry a tool clipped to yourself or to a bag or to wherever, there are far better options in terms of the capability of the tool than this. However, if you do want to carry it on your belt, the good news is that it is a really pretty good belt buckle. It is very easy to take off and put on. There we go. So this here, which is the pivot, is also the button to release the tool from your belt. If you don't push that, it stays on. If you do push that, it can slide in this direction and then lifts off. You can see there's a big hole and a small hole. Line the big hole, line the attachment piece on the back of the tool, up with the big hole, and you push to the side and it locks into place. Once you've got used to it on your belt, it is very easy to do quickly and easily. And it's just a very good way of holding the tool on your belt buckle. I have had a problem quite a lot of times with accidentally pushing the button as I've been carrying something heavy and it's pressed against my belt buckle and allowed the tool to slide a bit and then it's fallen off. Things like that, but as I've been wearing it for a long time now, I'm kind of used to that. And I know if I've done something that might have caused it to come off, so I just check it every now and again. I just tap my belt and see if I feel it. And I haven't lost it in over a year. So it's obviously not too difficult to keep track of. It's also important to point out that the design on this piece here has changed. And the earlier models of this tool had essentially a straight piece with a ball on the end. And in some of the earlier reviews of this tool that I saw, some people were complaining that their belt buckle would come undone if they leant forward or the tension came off it essentially. So this is a newer model, I assume, that has this new design to it. It may just be the Traveller models and specifically the Traveller models, but I doubt it. I'm assuming this is how they're doing them all now, and it's far better. I've never had the belt come undone accidentally at all. I've also never had any discomfort from wearing this belt whatsoever, which is pretty shocking because it is quite thick. It's far thicker than the belt buckle I was wearing before. And it is quite heavy, but again, no discomfort from it whatsoever at any point over a year now that I've been wearing it. In my opinion, the biggest advantage a tool like this offers over something like Gerber Dime is it frees up pocket space. So for me, I carry a knife, sometimes a UK legal, sometimes a locking knife, but I carry a knife in my right hand pocket and I carry a torch in my left hand pocket. And I'd rather not have any unnecessary pieces of metal in the bottom of my pocket scraping against my torch or my knife unless I need to. My car keys certainly get carried in the bottom of my pocket and sometimes scrape against things. But if I can avoid carrying a tool loose in the bottom of my pocket, I would prefer to. And that's where the big advantage of this tool comes in for me. I love having this tool as a belt buckle, completely frees up the pocket space, and it just gives me more freedom with how I'm carrying things because this is not taking up a space where I would usually carry any other tool. Now, this tool costs about £72. My opinion on that's quite difficult to explain. The build quality for £72 is not really up to scratch. There's a lot better stuff, a lot better build quality out there for less money than this is exhibiting at £72. However, for a tool that has such a big advantage for me and being the only tool that I know of that operates like this, it's kind of worth it, but only if this style of carry is something that you're very interested in. So, in conclusion, multi-tools as always are a hard thing to recommend or not because each person has a very specific use case. For some people will look at this tool and go, oh yeah, that seems quite cool, but it doesn't have a saw, so I'm not interested. Multi-tools are very, very specific. My opinion on this one is very mixed. I like it. I carry it all the time, I use it lots, and it works. But there's play in almost all of it. The wrong tools lock. The build quality overall's just not great. The driver sizes aren't quite right. And yeah, for me, it's more capable than something like a Gerber Dime, but that's about where its limit is. This tool is probably going to get more work done than this tool. However, this tool against this tool, not a fair comparison. So for me, it freed up a bit of pocket space. I find this easier to carry than the Gerber Dime that I was carrying before. And it's, in my mind, a slightly more capable tool, certainly when it comes to the pliers and the area that you get to grip on them. So I do like it, but it certainly is not without its flaws. If SOG made a new version of this that was considerably more expensive, but it was better made, they fixed the tool locks, they sorted out a couple of little issues with the tools, like the drivers not fitting properly, like the file not really being a file, then it would be a no-brainer for me. If SOG released a tool that was twice the price of this, but built properly, built really well, with really good tools in it, I would probably be on board with that. Because I like the style of carry, I like the platform, it's just not reached its potential yet. So I really hope we're going to see more versions of the Sync family out there in the future. That's it for today though. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.